Can you see? Can you see? We're gonna talk a little bit about fishing without bait today. And I'm looking in my little fishing kit here. You've seen this before probably. And instead of gorges and bone hooks, I've made some of these, some gigs. This one's shaped a little bit different. It's got some little places to tie on. The shank's a little narrower because I'm using river cane. So I'm going to go down into the shank and then tie on. This one's got a narrower shank and it ties on up here. So we're going to talk a little bit about attaching to the shaft, and then I'm going to show you a system I've created to fish with. More like a harpoon, really. So which one should we go with? Maybe the longer one. It's prettier. We'll go with it. Now, I'm going to be using artificial sinew. I'm not going to need all this, so I'm probably going to take about that much. And I made a little scaling knife out of some of that rib bone I was working on. I made this side serrated so that I could loosen up the scales, and this side's more of a scraper. It's not as sharp as a knife, but it will do. You can get a pretty good edge on it. And one thing that works really well is to separate it into smaller fibers. So I've got a thicker piece. Artificial sinew is really just waxed. It's like a waxed string. But I want it about the size of dental floss, not as thick as this is. So here we go. So I've got my shaft, piece of river cane. For an arrow, I usually use about 30 inches of river cane. But because I'm going to be using a non-traditional launcher for this, this is a 40-inch arrow. Again, I've carved a little bit of a notch deeper than I would for an arrow. My harpoon head just fits right in. That smaller part's going to go down into the shaft, and then it's going to butt up. And it's pretty tight fit, just like that. But I don't want this to go into an animal and stay, like I would with maybe an arrow. I want the barbs to catch the fish, and then be able to pull this whole stake up out of the water and have a fish on the end. I don't want to lose my barb. Some of the Inuit harpoons would actually have holes drilled in the barbs because that was the idea. The string would tie to the barb and they would throw it in, and then they'd pull the fish in almost like it was on a hook, but the barb would be in the fish's flesh. This particular system, I have got a hole drilled in my arrow shaft and it's tied off to the shaft. So I'm going to put sinew on just to hold it all in place. I don't want, like I said, I don't want to lose anything. So I do it a little different. Let me see if I can get closer. I make a loop. Loosey things. It's going to be difficult to film. But I make a loop and I lay it here. And then I've got a little bit sticking out up here that I want to be out of the way. It's going to be difficult for you to see. I apologize, but I'm going to try to do it. And then I want to get it started. I want to turn around. I'm getting under that bottom barb, but I'm going underneath the connection point. So now it's all held in a little bit. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go up into this. I don't want to trap that single fiber there because I'm going to use it to pull it all tight in a little bit. So I want to go up here and here in this barb, go back down. Maybe go around. Oh, if you don't have kids, you got to have some kids, y'all. It's the best thing you'll ever do in your life. So I'm just going to tie this thing on, a lot like you would an arrowhead. Just go over and over in the X pattern. I'm trapping my cord. I don't want to do that, and I'll show you why. To do that. Okay. So now we've got enough on there to probably hold it pretty good. And we're going to start going down the shaft now with what's left. Down the shaft a little ways.
Now it's my turn.
Okay. Now we're going to stick this through. We got this little hole still, this little loop. We're going to stick this through, and we're going to pull this string up here. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull our knot up under our wrapping. Wow, I hope this turns out. So now it's trapped. And what you can do now is, I'm going to cheat and use this other bar. You can trim it off. It's not like a knife, but it will work. I hope. It's awkward because I've got the whole thing attached already to the shooter, the launcher.
What gunshot was it?
Well, that barb's not quite sharp enough. I'm going to have to resort to my metal here. Hadn't gone completely primitive yet, have I? So that's all pulled through. We're going to cut that off. And so now our barb's secure. So let me show you what I've done as far as the launcher. This is a 40-inch arrow. I do not have a fletch because I'm going to be throwing at a very short distance. I got this idea from a young man I met from the Bahamas. He and his friends would get tubes, and they would get surgical tubing, and get the tube, and they would get those zip ties and attach the surgical tubing in a loop to the end of the tube, and then they would get metal rods and they would shoot them through that tube to get to lobster that were hiding under these stone ledges out in the water. What I've done is I've made a little bow board, I guess you'd call it. I've got a piece of surgical tubing. I've drilled 2 holes and stuck little pieces of plastic, little shims in there to hold the tubes tight so they don't pull through. You can also tie knots. I do that with my slingshots. And then I've got a piece of paracord and just tied a loop at the end so that I can seat this arrow that has about 9 feet of double twisted yucca cordage that I made. You unwind it all. Goodness. Alright. So a few inches down from the shaft, I've got a hole drilled and this is tied off. This cordage is tied off. There's my harpoon head. Down here I have it notched just like I would an arrow. What I'm going to do, the other end of the string is tied off here. There's a little slot in the board. Let's see what this person's doing. This just seats here. Again, I don't need fletching because of the short distance, but this is what this thing looks like. I'm going to get out in the water. I'm not fishing today, but I just want to show you how the system works. It would be illegal for me to take fish this way here. So let me set up a little differently, and we'll show you how the set operates. Here I'm shooting off the shore here. It's better to get out towards the deeper part. It goes through the middle. That's where you're going to see the fish. But I'm just going to put the arrow in place, the harpoon, whatever you want to call it. Wait till I see something. There's about 9 foot of cord on here, which is plenty. I'm going to shoot. That's all there is to it. It's a simple little system. Makes a big splash. So we just pull back the surgical tubing. We take aim. We got about 9 feet to play with here. There we go. It's a harpoon. That's all it is. It's a board with some surgical tape. We reel our fish in, hopefully. One thing I want to say, these are bone harpoons, so you're going to get breakage. You hit the bottom. That's still enough to go into a fish and harpoon it, but we've lost our tip. Now we can smooth that off with a rock, or we can sharpen it back to a point. Either way, it's going to be effective because the edges are sharp. So you're going to lose that unless you start making yourself some metal tips. The bone is just so easy to work with. This was a rib bone from a mill I had. You throw the rib bone out in the yard for about a month and the marrow rots out, and you can make some beautiful little artifacts with it. So that is my bow board. And my little helper. Come here, my little helper.
Oh.
No? You're mean. Alright.